Right now, somewhere in the world's oceans, a container ship is carrying enough toxic cargo to poison an entire coastline. Most will complete their journeys without incident. But when one doesn't, when fire breaks out, when the hull breaches, when the vessel slips beneath the waves, it doesn't just sink, it detonates. When the Express Pearl caught fire and subsequently sank off the coast of Sri Lanka in May 2021, it didn't merely represent another maritime casualty to be cataloged in insurance industry databases and forgotten by the general public within a news cycle. Instead, it manifested as perhaps the most comprehensively documented case study in how a single container ship can transform hundreds of square kilometers of ocean into a chemical warfare zone, releasing compounds that will persist in biological systems for generations while simultaneously demonstrating the terrifying permanence of seemingly innocuous cargo. This wasn't just another maritime casualty to be cataloged and forgotten, it was an ecological catastrophe that will persist for generations. The vessel was carrying approximately 25 tons of nitric acid in its cargo manifest, a compound that, when released into seawater, doesn't simply dilute into harmlessness, but rather initiates a cascade of chemical reactions that fundamentally alter the pH and oxygen dynamics of the surrounding water column. Nitric acid, with a pH approaching 0 in concentrated form, creates localized acidification that can extend for kilometers depending on current patterns, effectively dissolving the calcium carbonate structures that form the skeletal foundation of coral reefs and the shells of countless marine organisms. This acidification doesn't announce itself with visible warning signs. Rather, it operates insidiously, weakening reef structures that may not collapse for months or years after exposure, creating a delayed-action ecological bomb that continues its destructive work long after the initial chemical plume has dispersed. Simultaneously, the Express Pearl released approximately 300 tons of heavy fuel oil. This isn't the gasoline you put in your car. It's one of the most persistently toxic substances regularly transported across oceans, containing concentrated polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, heavy metals like vanadium and nickel, and sulfur compounds. When bunker fuel hits the ocean, it doesn't form a convenient surface slick that can be scooped up. Wave action breaks it into tiny droplets that drift throughout the water column, coating everything they contact with a toxic film that suffocates filter feeders, poisons fish larvae, and accumulates in fatty tissues as it moves up the food chain. Yet the most insidious cargo wasn't liquid at all. It was small plastic pellets called Nurdles, the raw material for manufacturing plastic products. The Express Pearl was carrying 70 billion of them. Each pellet measures 3 to 5 millimeters in diameter, almost perfectly mimicking the size and appearance of fish eggs and other planktonic organisms that form the base of oceanic food webs. When these pellets entered the water, they didn't sink to the bottom or float in recoverable concentrations. They dispersed according to complex current patterns, some washing onto beaches where they'll persist for centuries, others drifting into the open ocean to circle in subtropical gyres indefinitely, still others settling into sediments where they'll fragment into microplastics without ever biodegrading. The catastrophic nature of nurdle pollution lies in its fundamental impossibility of remediation. You cannot strain billions of pellets from hundreds of cubic kilometers of seawater any more than you can unscramble an egg. These pellets also attract other pollutants in the water. Toxic chemicals stick to their surfaces, turning them into tiny poison carriers that deliver concentrated contamination to any animal that eats them. The 2011 Rena disaster off New Zealand revealed how long the damage from a single ship can last. After the vessel struck Astrolabe Reef and broke apart, fuel oil and hazardous cargo spilled into the ocean. More than a decade later, scientists still report declining fish populations, struggling coral recovery, and contamination in the seabed, with no clear signs of natural recovery. When the Golden Ray capsized in September 2019, rolling completely onto its port side in water shallow enough that portions of the hull remained above the surface, salvage engineers confronted a structure weighing approximately 71,000 tons, containing over 4,000 vehicles in its cargo decks, fuel oil in its bunkers, and lubricating fluids, hydraulic oils, and battery acids distributed throughout its systems. The conventional approach to removing such a wreck would involve refloating the vessel through the introduction of compressed air and the deployment of massive pumping systems. But the Golden Ray had sustained structural damage during the capsizing event that made such an approach impossible. The hull had fractured in multiple locations, making it impossible to establish the watertight integrity necessary for refloating. Engineers developed an unprecedented solution, cutting the entire vessel into 8 separate sections using a specialized chain system. Enormous cutting chains, each link weighing 500 pounds, were pulled through the steel hull. But the reality proved far more complex than theory. The chains encountered reinforced structural members, vehicles with their own fuel tanks and batteries, and unexpected debris that required constant adjustment. Each section, once separated, weighed approximately 9,000 tons and had to be carefully lifted, stabilized, and placed onto a transport barge for removal to a dismantling facility. And the entire process had to be conducted while simultaneously implementing environmental protection measures to prevent the release of pollutants from the wreck. The operation, which wasn't completed until late 2021, required the construction of a massive environmental protection barrier around the entire wreck site, the deployment of teams working in hazardous conditions, including collapsed interior spaces filled with oil and debris, and the coordination of multiple specialized contractors, including cutting experts, environmental consultants, marine engineers, and salvage masters. The total cost exceeded $800 million, and the operation still resulted in the release of significant quantities of oil and debris into the surrounding waters, despite all protective measures, demonstrating that even with unlimited resources and the most sophisticated engineering approaches available, reversing the consequences of a ship sinking remains an imperfect science at best. What makes these disasters even more economically complex is the ancient maritime legal principle known as general average, a concept dating to the Byzantine Rhodian sea law, but still very much enforced today. The concept is straightforward, but its implications are shocking. When a ship faces peril and the captain takes measures to save the voyage, everyone with cargo on that ship must share the financial burden proportionally. If you shipped a container on a vessel that sank or required expensive salvage, you can be held liable for a portion of the total loss, even if your specific container was recovered intact. Insurance companies require cargo owners to post bonds worth significant percentages of their cargo value before releasing recovered goods. Sometimes, the cost of recovering your cargo exceeds the value of the goods themselves, leading owners to simply abandon it, which further complicates wreck removal. Can you simply walk away from a sunken ship? Technically, yes, but the vessel becomes a navigation hazard, continues leaking pollutants as it corrodes, and may eventually fall under government jurisdiction, requiring the original owner or their insurers to fund removal. The legal battles can stretch for decades. At this very moment, over 53,000 merchant vessels are traversing the world's oceans. Among them, approximately 5,500 container ships are executing continuous circuits across established shipping lanes, transporting roughly 11 billion tons of cargo annually, 90% of everything the modern world consumes. The system operates with such efficiency that a container loaded in Shenzhen can arrive in Ohio within 3 weeks. Yet within this massive industrial operation exists a statistical reality rarely discussed publicly. Ships sink. Not often, but consistently. The International Union of Marine Insurance reports that on average, between 50 and 100 total losses occur among large commercial vessels each year. Container ships represent a fraction of these losses. But when they go down, the consequences are disproportionately severe due to the sheer volume and variety of cargo and fuel they carry. The regulatory framework governing this industry operates through international conventions like SOLAS, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, which mandates stability requirements and safety equipment. Yet, enforcement remains fragmented because ships operate under the flag of their registered country, which may be thousands of miles from where the vessel operates or where its owners are based. This system of flags of convenience allows owners to register vessels in countries with less stringent oversight, creating a regulatory race to the bottom that prioritizes efficiency over safety margins. When disasters occur, legal gaps in accountability emerge. The Nairobi International Convention on the Removal of Wrecks attempts to establish clear responsibility for cleanup costs, but it only applies within a country's exclusive economic zone, and only if that country has ratified the convention. Beyond those boundaries, in international waters covering vast stretches of ocean, sunken vessels may simply be abandoned if removal costs exceed insurance coverage. Insurance is designed primarily around financial liability rather than environmental remediation. If removing a wreck in deep water costs more than the environmental damage assessment, the economic incentive favors abandonment. Cargo insurance protects the financial value of goods, but doesn't account for the environmental cost of those goods ending up on the ocean floor, slowly leaching chemicals as containers corrode. The ocean floor contains thousands of modern-era shipwrecks, each one a potential or active source of contamination, and the rate continues. Every year adds new wrecks, some documented, others disappearing in deep water where their exact locations remain unknown, their pollution release happening in darkness and silence. The ocean doesn't operate on human timeframes. The Nurdles released in 2021 will still exist in 2032, potentially in the stomachs of species not yet evolved, having passed through generation after generation. The heavy metals from corroding batteries will cycle through food webs long after the products they powered are forgotten. The acidification from nitric acid spills will weaken reef structures that won't collapse visibly for decades, creating cascading ecological failures that ripple forward through time. We've built a system of remarkable efficiency that delivers unprecedented material abundance at costs low enough to make transcontinental shipping economically invisible. But efficiency and consequence operate on different timescales. The system optimizes for quarterly earnings and delivery speed. The ocean measures in centuries, in extinction rates, in the gradual accumulation of chemical signatures that will mark our geological era in sediment cores. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. See you in the next video.